please take a moment to like and subscribe to the show. So I want you to imagine that you're running a small startup.
Right.
You and your team just successfully invented the world's smallest heart pump. I mean, it's a revolutionary piece of medical technology, but, you rely entirely on government research grants to keep the laboratory lights on and to pay your engineers.
Yeah, which is very common for that kind of deep tech.
Exactly. And then suddenly the government just completely turns off the funding tap for 5 straight months. What do you do?
Well, you panic usually.
Right. Today, we are looking directly at the legislation that was urgently passed to prevent that exact nightmare from destroying American innovation. I'm talking about S.3971, the Small Business Innovation and Economic Security Act.
And just to be completely precise regarding the status of S.3971, this is no longer a pending piece of legislation.
Right, it's done.
Yeah, it officially became public law No. 1/1983 on April 13th, 2026. And it wasn't even close, It passed the House by a massive bipartisan margin of 345 to 41.
And then it just sailed through the Senate by voice vote.
Exactly. So our objective today is to unpack exactly how this legislation fundamentally redesigns what is known as America's Seed Fund.
Which is such an interesting name. That title actually refers to the Small Business Innovation Research and the Small Business Technology Transfer Programs.
Right, commonly known in the industry as SBIR and STTR.
Yeah. And to fully grasp why this legislation was rushed through in early 2026, you really have to understand the historical context, like what America's Seed Fund actually does on a day-to-day basis.
I mean, it's a massive program.
It is. Since 1982, this program has distributed over $77 billion to 33,000 small businesses across the country.
And we're not just talking about minor upgrades here. It has funded the foundational research for world-changing technology.
Right, like the early development of GPS, wireless communications, life-saving HIV treatments, and like we mentioned, the world's smallest heart pump.
The underlying premise of the whole program is that small, agile businesses drive a disproportionate share of technological innovation in the United States.
Sure, but those small teams, they really struggle to compete for federal research and development contracts against, massive multi-billion-dollar prime contractors.
Yeah, because those giants have dedicated armies of grant writers.
Exactly. So the government uses these specific SBIR and STTR grants to level the playing field, basically nurturing these highly specialized startups that are taking massive scientific risks.
Which brings us directly to the crisis of 2025.
Yeah, this was bad.
It was. On September 30, 2025, there was an unprecedented 5-month lapse in the statutory authority that keeps these programs running.
So grant funding was entirely frozen.
Completely frozen. Scheduled new funding cycles were canceled without any warning whatsoever.
So these highly specialized startups were suddenly staring down the barrel of potential bankruptcy.
Right?
It is exactly like shutting off the water supply to a greenhouse.
That's a good way to put it.
I mean, even a short pause can permanently kill the most delicate and promising seedlings. You cannot just pause high-level, complex scientific research.
No, you definitely can't.
Like, you can't tell a team of quantum physicists to hit pause on their experiments, stop paying rent on their highly specialized equipment, and just come back in 5 months when the paperwork is sorted out.
That is the exact operational reality they faced. And so the solution presented in S.3971 is a sweeping 5-year extension through September 30, 2031.
Which is huge.
Yeah, it provides a desperately needed window of stability for the entire ecosystem. Because when a small technology firm knows the program is fully authorized for the next half-decade, they can actually confidently plan multi-year research and development strategies.
Right, they have runway.
Exactly, and more importantly, they can recruit top-tier engineering talent away from private tech giants. Because now they don't have the immediate threat of programmatic termination just hanging over their heads.
So why did this critical pipeline of innovation lapse in the first place?
Well, that's where the politics come in.
Right. To understand how this new law ultimately changes the rules of the program, you have to examine the fierce central debate between its two primary sponsors. It reveals two entirely different philosophies on how government funding should actually work.
Yeah. On one side, we have Senator Joni Ernst, a Republican from Iowa, and on the other, Senator Edward Markey, a Democrat from Massachusetts.
Right. So Senator Ernst approached the legislation with a strict focus on fiscal accountability and national security.
She directed her criticism at a phenomenon she described as SBIR mills.
Mills, right?
Yeah. These are a relatively small number of large, very experienced companies that she argued prioritize winning government grants over actually achieving commercial success in the open market.
And the data backing her position is actually striking. Over a decade, just 25 companies received 18% of all DoD SBIR dollars.
Which is roughly $2.3 billion concentrated in a very small, exclusive group of firms.
2.3 billion. Yeah. So she pointed to disappointing transition rates for these companies, arguing they were essentially living perpetually off government grants rather than delivering finished mass-produced products to the military.
Right. So her original plan, which was introduced as the Innovate Act, proposed a strict $75 million lifetime cap on any single firm, basically to force the money out to new players.
But then you have the perspective of Senator Markey.
Yeah.
His motivation was preserving a strictly merit-based system.
Exactly. He argued that implementing lifetime caps would arbitrarily kneecap firms that are providing essential, highly niche technologies to the military.
And the data supporting his position came from an independent 2025 study. That study demonstrated that the top grant winners actually yield a massive 2.6 to 1 return on investment.
Yeah. And they possess a 62% transition rate from phase 1 to phase 2 of the program.
Right. So he aimed to maintain what he explicitly called a Darwinian paranoia-inducing competition, where the absolute best scientific ideas win, regardless of how many times a particular company has won in the past.
Right. He didn't want to punish success.
But let me challenge this dynamic for a second. Looking at how these firms operate, are these so-called mills actually gaming the system maliciously? Or are they just highly specialized government research labs that happen to operate legally as private companies?
Well, the data actually supports both interpretations, depending entirely on which metric you emphasize.
Okay, how so?
If you look at pure commercialization, meaning these companies taking a product and selling it to the private civilian sector, the success rates for these frequent winners look incredibly low. They hover around 16%.
Which sounds terrible.
Right. However, if you include subcontracting and procurement directly to the military, their success rate jumps drastically to 63%.
Oh, wow. Okay, so they really are acting precisely as highly specialized government research labs.
Exactly. They have figured out exactly how to write proposals tailored perfectly to highly specific, highly classified DoD requirements.
Right, they're providing niche technologies like radiation-hardened satellite components. A traditional commercial startup would never build that because there is absolutely zero civilian market for them.
Precisely.
So how did they resolve this clash of philosophies?
The final law reflects a structural compromise. S.3971 outright rejects the $75 million lifetime cap.
Okay, so Ernst didn't get the lifetime cap.
No, but instead, starting in 2027, the heads of each federal agency must set annual proposal caps.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They will restrict the maximum number of Phase 1 and Phase 2 proposals any single firm can submit in a single calendar year.
So the underlying mechanism is designed to force firms to prioritize the absolute quality of their scientific proposals over the sheer quantity of their submissions.
Exactly. The logic is, if these frequent winners are truly brilliant research labs, they will simply submit fewer but vastly superior grant applications.
That makes sense. But because those annual proposal caps strictly limit how many applications a firm can submit, the new law has to simultaneously change the system to offer much larger financial rewards for the best ideas.
Right.
And this addresses a massive structural flaw in technology development, universally known as the Valley of Death.
Right. The Valley of Death is this precarious, often lethal gap between developing a functioning prototype, which occurs during Phase 2 of the program, and actually securing a massive government procurement contract, which is Phase 3.
Right, because often a small business uses their Phase 2 funds to build a truly brilliant prototype that works perfectly.
Yeah, the tech is great, but
Yeah.
the federal acquisition process moves incredibly slowly. I mean, it can take 2 to 3 years for the government to finalize the paperwork to buy that product in bulk.
And during that waiting period, the small business has absolutely no revenue.
None.
They cannot pay their engineers. They fall into the Valley of Death and just go bankrupt before the government ever signs the final purchase order.
Yeah. So S.3971 addresses this exact structural flaw with a new mechanism called the Strategic Breakthrough Allocation.
Okay.
Under this system, federal agencies with over $100 million in SBIR obligations can dedicate up to 0.50% of their extramural research and development budgets to these specific breakthrough awards.
And just to be clear for you listening, extramural simply means research that is funded by the government agency but conducted outside of it by private companies or universities.
Right. And because of this allocation, the funding cap jumps drastically. We are moving from a standard phase 2 cap of about $2 million up to a staggering $30 million per individual firm.
30 million.
Yeah, 30 million.
But there's a catch, right?
A big one. The catch is the incredibly stringent criteria required to access that $30 million. The law imposes a strict one-to-one matching requirement.
Okay, so for every single federal dollar granted via a strategic breakthrough award, the firm must secure an equal amount of capital from private venture capital investment or non-SBIR federal funds.
Exactly. You can compare this directly to the highly successful Israeli startup nation model.
Right. Israel manages a funding system heavily geared toward immediate commercial application, where the government acts primarily as a catalyst for private venture capital.
Yeah. By demanding private matching funds, the United States government is essentially outsourcing a significant portion of the financial risk assessment to the private market.
We also need to look at the highly specific rules applied to the Department of War, or DOW.
Yeah, their rules are even stricter.
Right. For their specific breakthrough awards, the applicant needs a formal commitment from a senior acquisition official to include the capability in a program objective memorandum.
Right.
Furthermore, 20% of those matching funds must come directly from internal department funding outside of the SBIR program.
Yeah. And to clarify, a program objective memorandum, commonly called a POM, is essentially a formal, legally binding commitment by the military to budget for a specific technological capability in their future spending plans. So by requiring that 20% of the matching funds come from the military's own internal budget, the law forces the military to prove they actually want the technology enough to pay for it out of their own pocket, rather than just using free SBIR grant money to fund science experiments they will never deploy.
Wait, I have to push back on this private matching requirement, though.
Okay.
By demanding private venture capital matching, does this not force the government to only fund safe, commercially viable bets, rather than the truly revolutionary high-risk science the program was originally built for?
That's a great point.
I mean, if I need venture capital money, the investors will want a quick return on a software app, not a 20-year material science project.
Yeah, that is the fundamental tension of this matching requirement, and it is a very real concern in the industry. Venture capitalists universally seek a return on their investment within 5 to 7 years.
Right, typically through software or easily scalable consumer technology.
Exactly, but deep tech things like experimental materials, science, advanced propulsion, or quantum sensor arrays might take 15 to 20 years to mature into a profitable product.
Yeah.
So if you strictly require a venture capital match, you naturally filter out technologies that have a massive strategic benefit for national security, but absolutely zero commercial viability in the short term.
Right.
The DOW's specific rule, allowing internal military funds to serve as the match, is specifically designed to mitigate this risk for defense technologies.
But for civilian agencies, the focus will undoubtedly shift toward funding technologies that venture capitalists already want to fund anyway.
Exactly. Now, if the government is suddenly handing out $30 million checks to tiny startups, protecting the intellectual property of those companies becomes a massive priority.
Yeah, absolutely. And S.3971 brings robust, sweeping security overhauls based on very harsh geopolitical realities.
Right. The intelligence community provided numerous classified reports showing foreign adversaries, specifically the Chinese Communist Party, actively targeting SBIR-funded startups to exfiltrate critical intellectual property.
Which makes sense. I mean, when the government is handing out seed money to thousands of tiny, completely unknown companies across the country, those companies become incredibly soft targets.
Extremely soft. A foreign entity can invest a seemingly small amount of money into a cash-strapped startup through a shell corporation, gain a single seat on the board of directors, and legally access highly sensitive, federally funded research without ever hacking a single computer.
So the new vetting process established by this law goes far beyond basic cybersecurity checks.
Way beyond. Federal agencies must now conduct rigorous forensic assessments of foreign ownership, equity distributions, and debt obligations.
Right. They look at the personal ties of key personnel to countries of concern. They analyze every technology licensing agreement and joint venture.
And they are aggressively checking federal watch lists, things like the UFLPA entity list, the non-SDN list, the Section 889 prohibition list, and the military end user list.
Think of this exactly like a bank security system. We are moving from just checking to make sure the locks on the front door work to doing a full forensic audit of who exactly financed the construction of the building in the first place and who holds the mortgage.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy. And debt obligations are particularly important in that forensic audit.
How so?
Well, a startup might not have a foreign owner on paper anywhere in their equity structure. But if they owe a massive high-interest debt to a foreign entity, that foreign entity has immense leverage over the startup's operations.
Right.
So the new law requires a holistic, exhaustive review of all these financial and personal affiliations before a single dollar is dispersed.
Crucially, to prevent this system from becoming a bureaucratic nightmare for the startups, there's a transparency clause built into the law. If an agency denies an award based on foreign risk, they must officially notify the business of the specific criteria that triggered the denial.
This transparency clause is vital because it prevents opaque blacklisting.
Right. Before this legislation, a startup might be denied a grant award and have absolutely no idea why. They were just shut out of the system.
Exactly.
Well,
Now, if the government identifies a problematic foreign investor hiding on the capitalization table, they legally must notify the startup.
which allows the business to take informed corrective actions.
Yeah. The startup can choose to buy out the problematic foreign investor or terminate the high-risk joint venture entirely and then regain their eligibility for future government awards.
So it gives American startups a fair chance to clean up their operations and protect their own intellectual property.
Exactly.
So if these new security audits require massive legal and compliance efforts, and the awards are jumping to $30 million, what is the actual economic impact of this bill on taxpayers and the broader startup ecosystem?
Well, the Congressional Budget Office estimates the direct government costs to implement the new reporting requirements is actually a very modest $1 million over the 2024 to 2029 period.
Really? Just $1 million?
Yeah, primarily just to fund a single Small Business Administration employee to track the data.
But you have to look at the total scope of the bill, which is an approximately $6 billion measure.
Right. By formally reauthorizing the funding through the end of the decade, the law legally allows unobligated 2026 funds to roll over into 2027.
Which ensures the capital that was stalled and frozen during that devastating 5-month lapse is not lost to the Treasury.
Yeah. And the historical return on investment absolutely justifies this massive scale.
Oh, for sure. Data shows that for every single taxpayer dollar invested in this program, between $22 and $33 is returned to the broader economy.
I mean, think about that multiplier. A 2019 DoD report found these specific programs sustain 1.5 million high-paying jobs and generate $39 billion in tax revenue.
Despite those incredible numbers, we also have to detail the 3 potential unintended second-order effects of this legislation that experts are warning about.
Right, it's not all perfect.
First is the intense concentration of capital. Because agencies can now award $30 million at once under the breakthrough allocation, it could create a few champion startups, aggressively draining funds from the Phase I seed awards.
Yeah.
And that completely boxes out new entrants who just need $100,000 to test a theory.
Exactly. When a federal agency has a strictly finite budget for the year, issuing a single $30 million award means they mathematically cannot issue 30 separate Phase I seed awards of $1 million each.
Right. You are actively sacrificing broad, exploratory, high-risk seed funding across dozens of companies for highly concentrated scaling funding for just one company.
Yeah. And the second unintended consequence is severe bureaucratic friction.
Right. The intense national security vetting we just discussed might require highly specialized compliance staff that small teams simply do not have.
Gathering the extensive documentation required to definitively prove the total absence of foreign ties across all personnel, debt instruments, and equity structures, it takes immense resources and billable legal hours.
Yeah. A lean startup consisting of 3 aerospace engineers working out of a rented lab might simply give up on the application process altogether.
Exactly. This dynamic naturally favors wealthier, more established firms that can readily afford to hire dedicated compliance staff.
The third consequence is what industry insiders call the Valley of Death Cliff.
Yes.
Without aggressively reforming the broader Federal Acquisition Regulations, or FAR, these massive breakthrough awards might just create a much larger financial cliff at the end of the line.
Right. Giving a company $30 million absolutely helps them build a better, larger, more efficient production line. But if the government procurement officers are still strictly bound by the notoriously slow, archaic federal acquisition regulations, the company will still face a massive delay in getting the final Phase 3 procurement contract signed.
So they will just burn through $30 million while waiting for the bureaucracy, creating a much larger, more spectacular financial collapse.
Exactly. S.397 attempts to fix this by mandating specialized training for contracting officers regarding Phase 3 data rights and sole source contracts to help clear this path. But training alone does not fundamentally change the underlying procurement laws.
Which brings me to the ultimate question regarding all of these changes. By making the financial awards exponentially larger and making the security rules so incredibly complex, are we inadvertently shutting out the brilliant solitary scientist working out of a garage?
The blunt reality is yes.
Yeah.
The system is undeniably shifting away from the solitary scientist tinkering in a garage.
Yeah.
If you need to secure private venture capital matching funds and you need to pass a rigorous forensic audit of your global financial affiliations, you need to operate like a highly sophisticated corporation from day one. The federal government has clearly decided that the geopolitical threat to our intellectual property, combined with the urgent need to rapidly scale defense technology, heavily outweighs the romanticized notion of the lone garage inventor.
S.3971 successfully provides a decade of critical stability and represents a massive fundamental shift in American high-technology industrial policy.
It definitely does. It meticulously balances the urgent need for rigorous national security with the desire for dynamic economic growth.
But it leaves you with a critical dynamic to consider. As the United States government actively shifts its research and development strategy to require private capital matching, we are mirroring the private sector more closely than ever before in our history. Will the next generation of American public innovation be driven by the pursuit of pure theoretical scientific discovery, or will it be strictly dictated by immediate commercial profitability?